I am very, very happy to officially launch this cohort on deliberative democracy and citizens' assembly, and to push for this very important issue at the international level in the framework of the Summit for Democracy. So very, very big thank you to all of you, numerous people coming from governments, from NGO, experts, academic community, to join us to launch this very important work around the cohort on deliberative democracy and citizens' assembly. I'm not alone here. There will be very important speakers. Just to tell you in a nutshell what they will be talking about, we want to reinforce our representative democracy, which are under many threats nowadays. We want to have a democracy that is more than what happens at the ballot box. We want to involve citizens between elections in a meaningful way in decision and policy making. And we want to build on a format that is proven to be very interesting and very successful, which is the randomly selected citizens' assembly, which deliberate and prepare collective recommendation. I know that many of you may have already experimented this format, some of you not at all, and this is why we are here to exchange about this exciting perspective that will bring new innovation and reinforce our democracies. But I will give the floor straight away to the speakers we have with us today. First of all, we will hear the Vice Presidents for Democracy and Demography from the European Commission, Dubravka, Šuica, who was also the co-chair of the Conference on the Future of Europe, and she will tell us more about that. She has an exciting title of her presentation, which is Leading by Doing, Embedding Deliberative Democracy at EU Level. So we will be very happy to hear her. And then we will hear a bit more about the cohort. First of all, also from Ireland, who is co-leading the cohort with Art O'Leary, who is the Secretary General for the Electoral Commission in Ireland, and also the Secretary of Citizens' Assemblies happening now. He will tell us a bit more why Ireland has decided to co-lead this cohort and why the subject is important. Then we will hear the Executive Director of the New Democracy Foundation, Iain, who has been a lot behind and is sponsoring also this cohort, and will explain more concretely the type of documents we have been working on and that we want to propose to the people joining the cohort, which is a draft declaration and a list of model commitments. And then finally, the last word will go to Graham Allen, who has also been a very active supporter of this cohort, who is the convener of the Citizens' Convention on UK democracy. And he will have the task to simply talk about the future of democracy at the end of this panel. But first of all, I'd like to propose that the Vice President of the European Commission, Dubravka Šuica, takes the floor first and share with us her view on deliberative democracy and the specific experience on the Conference on the Future of Europe. Vice President, you have the floor. Thank you.
Vice President, you are muted.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Gaëtane. First of all, a warm welcome to everyone joining us online. We have a truly global audience with us today. This shows how precious our democracy is in our daily lives. It is why we are so committed to making a success of the Summit for Democracy. And this deliberative democracy cohort in particular. First of all, I would like to thank Art, Iain, and Graham for their untiring work with us in the European Commission, in particular, your work in designing this innovative cohort on deliberative democracy and citizens' assemblies, bringing ideas together that are so fundamental for the future of our democracy. All of us know that democracy faces many challenges in the current geopolitical context. These challenges are diverse and can be found both on and offline. These challenges can be found at the local, regional, and national levels. And the European Union is not immune. These complex challenges and crises affect the quality of our democracies. The European Commission welcomes the work of the Summit for Democracy. It is a truly global effort which offers a possibility for those of us who are committed to democracy to bring together our diverse experiences. The summit has provided an innovative platform for inclusive international alliances. It is needed more than ever in face of democratic backsliding. The European Commission fully supports the summit. It is a timely initiative to strengthen support for the defense of democracy across the world, and the European Union has played an active role in the summit's year of action. Our contribution stems from a series of flagship programs and novel initiatives developed to support democracy within the European Union, but also beyond. Several European initiatives contribute to the summit process in different ways. I'm referring here to initiatives such as Digital Service Act, the European Media Freedom Act, our external democracy support, and various other policies that underpin these effects. As we gather today to launch the Deliberative Democracy Cohort, we in the European Union have a unique experience to share and to build on with the unprecedented Conference on the Future of Europe. This has been a unique example of participatory and deliberative democracy in the European Union. It was based on 3 pillars: a multilingual digital platform, European citizens panels, and the plenary format that can never be tried before. The conference brought citizens together with the political representatives on an equal footing. It has been an exciting experience. I may say exciting experience and exciting experiment. And one I had the pleasure to lead on behalf of the Commission, as already said by Gaëtane. It shows how participatory and deliberative innovative processes can strengthen our representative democracy. Having held elected office at the local, at the national and European level, this is a very important point for me. Moreover, the deliberative process can enhance public trust in government and democratic institutions. They give citizens an effective role in policymaking, provided that it is done rigorously and includes feedback mechanisms, because democracy also happens between elections. The European Commission is committed to remain at the forefront of efforts to defend democracy within and beyond our borders. For example, in her State of the Union address on 14th of September last year, President von der Leyen announced a Defense of Democracy package. A key pillar will be a legislative proposal to protect citizens from foreign covert hostile interference. Hostile actors seek to use the institutions of democracy to weaken them from within. Therefore, besides countering the external factors, we must also build our democratic resilience from within. In a democracy, our greatest asset is our citizens. I believe that we must invest in fostering active citizenship and democratic participation across all generations. We need to raise awareness about the European civic space that has been evolving, because the European Union has created an unprecedented European democratic space. It crosses ages, borders, and cultures, and also histories. It is a transnational space. At the same time, all politics is local. I believe that we have the moral duty to nurture, protect, and secure this European democratic space at all levels, across all generations. To build democratic resilience from within, we must equip citizens as they engage in democracy. The protection of our democracy featured in the discussions during the Conference on the Future of Europe. Therefore, work on this deliberative cohort, which we are launching today, is of fundamental importance for citizens. And this is not about imposing deliberative democracy on anyone or anywhere. It is about sharing our best practices, our lessons learned from our own endeavors, what we did well and what we can improve, to lead by doing. That is the Commission's motto here. In our global efforts, as we face up to the rise of autocracy, is a global architecture in deliberative democracy necessary? Well, that is also a topic for discussion in this summit. I am very pleased to be working closely with Ireland, which I have visited twice in my current role. Irish citizens' assemblies have transformed their country from marriage equality to climate change. You have shown that when there is a political will behind deliberative processes, they can be embedded in the institutional framework. And this is why our Commission has decided to embed citizens' panels in our own policy pipeline. The first one on food waste has already started, with 2 more to follow in the coming months. I'm very proud that we are the first executive body anywhere in the world to have introduced these methods to our mainstream work. Once again, leading by doing. As the second Summit for Democracy approaches, the work within Cohort continues intensely. We are happy to note the progress on many different tools, including model commitments, planned publications such as handbooks, events, and thematic declarations. We are working on planned resources such as Youth Index and Best Practices Toolkit on Information Integrity. In the Deliberative Democracy Cohort, we work on guidelines and training on how to embed these practices in policymaking or citizens' assemblies. The large body of work involving both governments and non-governmental organizations is evidence that the cohorts are productive vehicles to take our joint work forward. The European Commission also co-leads the cohort on youth, political and civic engagement together with Nepal, Ghana, and a number of civic society organizations. We are also involved in the work of other cohorts, including information integrity and media freedom. And to conclude, the good news is that in this challenging environment, we see the hopes of people for democracy. Most of you present here today had the greatest luck to be born in a democracy. This was not the case for me. Fighting for democracy meant that I had to live through war. So I continue to fight every day of my life to make sure that everyone can grow up free and safe, because citizens are not objects of democracy, they are participants. Today's launch is part of building democratic resilience, equipping our citizens, making our democracy fit for the future. I conclude with a call to all of you to get engaged with the Summit for Democracy and this deliberative cohort. In particular, everyone, including governments, NGOs, civil society, all of you can join and sign up to this innovative work we are taking forward. The website address is in the chat, so please go online and make sure you are part of this new wave of innovation in democracy, because democracy, well, there is nothing better. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Vice President. That was very inspiring. Before I give the floor to Art O'Leary, I just wanted to say that we will have, after these introductions, a moment for question and answer. The Vice President will remain with us also to be part of that session, and we will collect these questions from the chat. Angela will look at them and make sure I get a good summary of them and I can address them to the right speakers. So go ahead, you can shoot as from now until the end of the different introductions. But thank you again very much, Vice President, and I now give the floor to Art O'Leary.
Thank you, Gaëtane, and many thanks, Vice President, for your kind words and for being with us today. It means an awful lot to us on the cohort. Of course, Vice President Šuica is absolutely correct. citizens' assemblies have contributed significantly to the transformation of Irish society with recommendations on difficult and complex sensitive issues, including abortion, marriage equality, and climate change, and has led to significant constitutional and legislative change in this country. There are many reasons why citizens' assemblies work in Ireland, but the main one is that we provide a safe and respectful space for 100 randomly selected everyday citizens chosen to be representative of society, and we give them the time and space to consider an issue from all perspectives and to think, to debate, to question experts and advocates and academics and practitioners, while all the same time deliberating amongst themselves. Our rule of thumb is that our members spend more time talking amongst themselves than they do listening. The cornerstone of our success are the principles we apply to each assembly: transparency, respect, equality of voice, fairness, efficiency, and collegiality. And in 10 short years, assemblies have developed from a quirky experiment that nobody had very high hopes for into a critically important part of the decision-making infrastructure in this country. Our most recent assembly, established to consider how our state should respond to the crisis of biodiversity loss, finishes this coming weekend and has been another great example of the commitment and energy of citizens as they grasp with intractable political problems. A year ago, we wrote to 20,000 randomly selected households, inviting them to take part in the assembly. The international response rate for such invitations is something around 5%. So we were expecting around 1,000 people to respond. We had a 13% response rate. Just think about that. 2,500 people in this small little country put their hand up and said, I'm willing to give up 7 weekends of my time this year to look at this particular issue, simply because we asked them to. Before we started work with this particular assembly, we asked them why they wanted to be involved, and a third of them said that they had an interest in the issue. Another third said that they wanted to make a contribution to public service. And interestingly, from my perspective, 1/3 of them said that citizens' assemblies in this country were the best way of getting hard jobs done. Next month, we start the recruitment for our next citizens' assembly already. This one is just finishing. We're starting straight away with another one to consider the issue of drug use in this country. There are no shortage of difficult problems to be solved. There's something going on in the world right now, and there's a momentum building around these initiatives. There's a hunger amongst citizens to get involved in the decision-making process, and a similar hunger exists within the political system for citizen engagement. In the past 10 months, I have spoken in 22 different countries about Ireland's experience with citizens' assemblies. Now, I didn't force myself on these countries. They knocked on our door and said, we want to do something. Ireland seems to have a successful story. Can you simply tell us how it works? It has been a great privilege to co-chair this cohort with Gaëtane and the EU Commission team. And some of the finest minds in the world on this subject over the past year have sat down to think about how best to deliver this on a global scale. We're very proud of our work. My great friend and colleague, Iain Walker of New Democracy in Australia, will talk to you next about our proposals. And I hope that there is something on this menu that you find attractive and you find valuable. Please come with us on this journey. It has been a hugely rewarding experience for all of us who have come this far. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Art. Well, you make the transition yourself. I give the floor to Iain Walker, who will tell us a bit more about the actual content of this cohort. Iain? Yes. And thank you for being there. I know it's late for you, right?
Late, early, it depends on how you look at it. But yes, good morning from Sydney. And firstly, thank you, of course. We wouldn't be here if stepping aside from would the European Commission and the Irish government sponsor this, we wouldn't be here if they hadn't actually run live fire active projects. In the time I have with you today, what I'm hoping to drive is that call to action, that difficult step from jumping from Zoom to what you actually go and do when you hang up this call. And the call to action is really simple. You've heard the Irish transformation. You've heard the ambition of what has been done across Europe. And the cohort and the summit is a chance to say, my government needs to hear this. Now, why we really need your help is you might be picturing, doesn't a summit for democracy involve great case studies like this? And by default, it doesn't happen without you. This actually needs people who go out and say to their national governments, you're going to make some commitments. I think you should hear about what has been achieved across Europe and in Ireland specifically. You need to hear this message. Now, what we are is an on-ramp. There was a learning journey within the European Commission. There was a learning journey within Ireland. People who have deployed it have said, I think we need to do A, B, and C to be able to really have that on-ramp to your first project, to building that understanding that occurs. But my message to you today is that what the cohort does is essentially give you the cheat notes for how to start. Your government, 100-odd governments actually made commitments after the first summit. Now, many can be soft and well-meaning. What we offer is a very practical list. I'm going to go through the first 7 or 8 of these and then hand to Graham, who will cover some of the more global initiatives. What would you do if you said, my government is a little bit interested? Well, the first thing is the list of commitments is up on the European Commission link that will appear in the chat. If you miss everything today, find my name. It's printed in the bottom, ian.walker@newdemocracy.com.au, and I'll email them directly. I found in my own journey with the Australian government that the first step they say is, I don't really understand what this thing is. The most common conception, particularly among a political audience, is that, is this a big opinion poll? So one of the first steps to actually doing and understanding are things around political workshops. Have a workshop, bring in people like Art, and depending on Madam Vice President's schedule, but perhaps an invitation there to say, what was that experience? What was that? Talk to me at a political level. Did you really trust something very, very different to what we normally do? And so within the cohort, you'll start to see commitments around, we will host a workshop with politicians. We will distribute the work that's been done by the OECD. These are simple, practical, actionable draft commitments. The point of the cohort is that a government that maybe one of the 20 that's contacted Art over recent months doesn't say, well, how do I start? What commitment do I make? There's 11 pre-written starting points that they can take. And hopefully, Angela, if you could just flash the link into the chat. I have not monitoring all the windows. Please, out of this, start to say, I'm going to take a look at what these are. Now, I've mentioned a couple of these, but essentially they all build into launch your first project, which really neatly ties into the theme Madam Vice President opened with, which is learn by doing. Similarly, for Art in Ireland, what have we seen many elected representatives really start to say, I want to try this? Because they've come and seen a project. Now, in the short amount of time, I hope this stimulates questions. One key theme I want you to take away is your government will be making commitments to the Summit for Democracy. The choice you have sitting on this call is, do they make something vague and general and a sweet commitment to something better? Or do they start to look at practical case studies that have worked across Europe, very practical examples in Ireland, and then take very practical commitments and action steps they can take? That was my message to you. Please come to us for practicality. Please know that it's in your hands to do it, because this won't just happen vaguely in the background. Great change becomes when people can connect to decision makers and say, you need to take a look at this. There's a story worth sharing. With that, I'll hand back to Gaëtane, because I'm not going to cover the last and largest and most interesting commitments. I'll leave those for Graham for that international side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iain. So I give the floor to Graham Allen for the last words before we open the question and answer. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Gaëtane. An official launch and the March Summit for Democracy are pretty good moments to review where we are, both historically and looking to the future. Looking at the last year, we've had further evidence of why our work is important. Putin's autocracy savaged a democratic country, Ukraine. We've had the autocratic Bolsonaro taking lessons from the autocratic Trump in trying to overthrow elected democracies. So there's plenty for us to do. But if we go right back to the beginning, President Biden set the vision for the Summit for Democracy when he said, this is all about the existential battle between autocracy and democracy. But there was a missing piece at that point over a year ago, missing piece of the jigsaw, a cohort which would enable citizens to play their part and to build on the success story of the 600 citizens' assemblies. So many people on this call helped sign the letter to the president, several letters to the president, asking that omission be put right. And I have to say, incredible credit goes to the State Department, who enabled the cohort to go ahead early last year. So when we started doing this, I guess we started, and in that letter I mentioned, there were clear references to the global architecture that Iain just referred to, which is needed to equip all our democracies to play their full part in that existential battle. So there were three main proposals, and Iain outlined the other ones, which are a little more national. Firstly, the creation of a What Works organization, linking all the best practice out there, the banks of best practice that already exist, and to be made available for free to absolutely anybody who can get on a computer and access it. For whatever reason, at whatever geography they want to operate, whatever policy they want to operate. The second one was what we call a Marshall Plan for Deliberative Democracy for all of the regions in the world that need it most. And we decided to start with Central and Eastern Europe. And that work has gone ahead at pace, and we've now got an action plan for that and are ready to rock and roll and do some serious business there. Thirdly, providing the Summit for Democracy itself. It's odd that the Summit for Democracy doesn't have a means of communicating with citizens. Well, we can help them out on that one. We can give them the means of listening directly to citizens by creating what we're calling a global citizens deliberation. And that work, again, is well underway. So much so, in fact, that you'll be very pleased to know that the three working groups I've just referred to, set up to develop these big ideas, have all now sent proposals to the summit preparation team. So not bad for a cohort that wasn't even officially launched until today. Some work has gone on before, you'll be pleased to know. So we now wait for that interaction with the summit team and the great support that we've come to expect from them. It's been really very positive, I've got to say. But also, we're looking forward to the encouragement and the endorsement of the summit itself in March. So setting these global goals and national goals is important. Delivering them in practice is essential. Otherwise, we'll be raising people up and then not delivering. So getting not just the cohort structure right, but getting the summit structure to deliver or to say why delivery can't happen is very, very important. Finally, with the clear leadership of Art and Gaëtane and Iain, we need to review how we can actually go on now and strengthen the cohort. We've made a great start, but how do we strengthen it? Opening up to a broader membership, perhaps, communicating effectively with them, bringing NGOs in to play their full part, working not just on gender balance, but on global inclusion as well. I think we're weak on Africa and Asia, and we're going to address that. But today is really, I think, a time to celebrate the thing that autocrats fear the most. Citizens knowing the means and the methods to take their rightful place, their central place in our democracy. That's what they're afraid of. So to celebrate that, and also I hope everybody on the call will join us today. And Vice President, it's particularly good to see you on the call. We know you've been very, very supportive in the background, and very, very good to see you on the call today leading us off. But also to celebrate with us the emergence of a cohort that can do exactly that, enable citizens to know the means and the methods by which they can start to get control back of their own democracies and engagement back with their democracies. And I think that is the most fantastic thing any of us as deliberative Democrats can do. And I'd just like to thank you all for being on the call, and thank you, all of you, for the various contributions you've made, from signing letters to being on working groups to just being interested in what we're doing. A big thank you from me, and I know the leadership team as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Graham. So perfect. We still have the half hour we imagined for a question and answer. So let's open it. I actually have, and first of all, I want to say, because some people are saying in the chat they are new to the topic, and we hope there are many people new to the topic. So please do not hesitate asking basic question, whatever comes to your mind. There are no good and bad question on this. But I have two questions perhaps that I could address to both Vice President Šuica and Art O'Leary. One of them is about the legacy of the second summit of democracy. Which international institutions have the greatest role in advancing the summit's outcome? And to what extent are the Commission working, for example, with the Council of Europe, the OSCE, UN partner in advancing democratic security? And then there is another question, which is more related to the Citizens Assembly / panels experience, to understand how the collective insights and point of view coming out of the Citizens Assemblies are conveyed to government policymakers, translated into policy. And it's very relevant timing for both of you, I guess, because you are both finishing two processes of Citizen Assembly now and then Conference on the Future of Europe in case of the European Commission. So let's first address these two questions. Maybe we could start with the Vice President.
Okay, first, we have as I already said, we have very good experience with the Conference on the Future of Europe. And although we call it experiment, I think there are lessons to be learned. And I don't know if you are aware, but a Commission work program for this year is based on citizens' recommendations. This is something which I haven't mentioned in my introductory speech, and I find it very important. So 75% of our proposals for this year is based on citizens' proposals and on the report from the Conference on the Future of Europe. So this is how we trust our citizens, how we trust our deliberative democracy. And as you know, as I already said, the deliberative democracy becomes a part of our policy making process. So we are now drafting European policy with the help of our citizens. And this is something which is totally innovative, and we are very proud of it. So conference was very good and very meaningful experience. And of course, we have to continue with these panels. So as I said, first panel was on the food waste, second one will be on mental health, third one will be on digital Europe, on metaverse. So there are many different legislations which will be preceded by citizens panels, by the citizens who will be selected randomly. So for us, conference is a very good experience. Regarding other institutions, of course, we are always inviting not only institutions, but first of all, NGOs. For us, NGOs are very important because they represent a very big number of our citizens all over Europe. But as I said, it's not only Europe, it's also beyond. Regarding other institutions, of course, we are in good relations with the Council of Europe, with many other institutions, but at this moment, regarding this cohort, I think OECD, of course, is very important for us, and we will continue our cooperation with others.
So Art, there was also another question, more practical, whether citizens receive financial support, and also how you make the information independent and accurate. So maybe you can answer Art this question also with the issue of the translation into policies.
Sure. There's well, there's actually, I'll deal with the easy questions first, perhaps. Yes, we do pay our citizens. We give them a very modest €500 for a citizens' assembly, not to pay them for their time, but simply to acknowledge their contribution to public service. And they're very happy for that. And it doesn't seem to be a bar for dealing with this. The transition from a citizens' assembly recommendation to constitutional change or legislative change is very simple, because it's one of the key issues that are so important for the success of any citizens' assembly. It should be very clear to the citizens when they sit down on the first day what will happen to their recommendations. And the Irish Parliament is very good at this. The Parliament establishes an assembly, it gives it its terms of reference, and then it explains what will happen to the recommendations when they are done. In our situation, the recommendations are sent back to Parliament, which creates a special committee to look at them. That committee reports and sends the report to government, and then the government comes into Parliament on a special debate on every citizens' assembly and explains which recommendations they are accepting and when they're going to be implemented. And then if they are not accepting a recommendation, they explain why they're not accepting it. So it's part of the transparency of the process, and everybody understands from the word go what happens. The independence of the information is such an important part of all of it. As the citizens start to bring themselves up to speed and to develop a mini expertise in the subject, it's very, very important that the academics and the experts who are giving them the information are giving them unbiased, fair information with no opinion involved in it. Our experts are not allowed to suggest to our citizens what they would do. Their job is simply to say, here's the situation right now, here's the proposal, here's what the law or the world might look like after this proposal is adopted, and here are some solutions to the problem, and the citizens themselves go on this journey of discovery to work it out. And if I could just deal with the first question that was asked by Ragnar, I think it's all too easy to expect that the big institutions like the United States and the European Union to carry the burden for democracy and deliberative democracy. It's all of our responsibilities as individual countries. We do expect leadership positions from the United States and from the European Union. And I was so pleased to see the Council of Europe start to dip their toe in this water in the recent Council of Europe presidency that Ireland had and the World Forum for Democracy. There was a very thorough examination and consideration of this issue, and I look forward to that conversation carrying on in Reykjavik in May. But we all have a part to play, but we look to the Vice President and the European Union Commission for leadership in this regard, as we do to the United States as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Perhaps a question for Graham, because it's about political parties. I know you have a former life as MP. Have those deliberative exercises, according to you, weakened political parties? Would be a good question for you. And have they delivered results for citizens at large, in addition to those already involved? Graham, maybe.
This ties into one of the points that Art made in his contribution just now. One of the key things that we have to get right here every time is the engagement of citizens' assemblies or other forms of deliberative democracy with elected representatives. Their legitimacy is as strong as ours, and they should not be at odds with each other. There should be early discussion between elected representatives and citizens' assemblies, which I may say Art and his colleagues in Ireland got down perfectly, so that people understood each other and what their roles were. The worst thing you can do is have a wonderful citizens' assembly and then present a report, plonk it on the desk of a Secretary of State at the end of the process. That is asking for trouble. If you are taking steps together, then everybody will understand the other side. You will also, by the way, get lots of elected representatives who will lobby on your behalf. Again, I'm sorry, Art, I'm using lots of Irish examples here because it's such a fantastic example. The representatives from the Parliament who went back to Parliament, having listened to the proceedings, were the greatest ambassadors, I am told, by yourself and Jane and David and others who I know are heavily involved in this. They were the greatest ambassadors to people who hadn't been from Parliament and were actually converting people to this process. And at the end of the process, it was up to the legislature and executive to adopt the normal framework and agree the things it wanted to agree with and set aside the things that it didn't. That's an example of processes working perfectly. So I think, to answer the question more directly, that actually helps political parties. Having been a member of Parliament for 30 years in the UK, it helps political parties have an impartial view of their agendas. And as Iain Walker often says, give us your hardest problems. You can do some of the most difficult ones, again, as Ireland proved, as France is proving at the moment on assisted dying. The things that are quite difficult for parties and members of Parliament can be taken away by impartial citizens, properly balanced microcosms of their own communities, who can then come forward with sensible, agreed ways to proceed. It's much easier to accept that as a politician than it is to be outvoted by people on the other side and say, well, we'll repeal it when we get into power.
Thank you, Graham. Perhaps to Iain, if you're okay, there was a question, what needs to be done on the public diplomacy side? The three most important messages to ordinary people on this topic that need to be amplified. And there was also a question whether it happens at which level, regional, national, and experiences you may have seen.
Thanks, Gaëtane. I'll actually start. I think that was Adrienne's question and Jacob's question right at the top, because they all go in a neat little row. Jacob asked, well, what's practically going to happen? How will it be used to nurture the knowledge and competencies among governments, legislators, and public officials? Jacob, at the end of the day, I'm an advocate for this. And so when we looked at what will the draft commitments be, we tried to run a little filter saying, if my government commits to any one of these, will it take the field forward? And so that's really the practical lens being taken. If they take the absolutely smallest step and say, that OECD handbook on good deliberative principles, I'm going to distribute that across every government agency. It's a very simple step. Yet for me as an advocate, I would feel a practical step has been taken and all 11 commitments pass that filter. To come to the question Gaëtane actually asked me, which came from Adrienne, is the cohort only targeting national levels? Now, the summit absolutely is a gathering of national governments, and national governments make commitments. However, what we're finding is a number of people simply want to make supporting statements from NGOs, from other tiers of government. One of the commitments actually says it's about a democracy action fund. It's an idea that's come from a cohort member, Mass LBP, and Peter McLeod in Canada. And it says to governments, why don't you spend 1 to 5% of what you spend on national elections into a fund that enables projects at a local government level? So to come to Adrienne's question, what you'd really be seeking is to say, hey, national government, because this is who will be making the commitment, create a pool of funds available for trials at a local level. But if people at regional level want to make a comment about the summit, I think everyone in the summit welcomes attention being paid to it and that innovation happening. The last point I just wanted to touch on was Sophia's question regarding South American representation. This links to the first two questions. Everything here is about national government commitments. So we have had contact from people in Chile and Brazil, and I believe Colombia as well. Art may actually add to that list as well. What I'd ask Sophia and everyone on the call is the lens here is, if you're in your country, we need you to take it forward. Get in touch. You know, my email's up on the chat. It's very easy to get in touch to see what we're having, to see how we actually go country by country. So hopefully that covers the three questions I was handed. Gaëtane?
Thank you very much. I think there's a question perhaps for the Vice President on the question where there is a great need for a clearinghouse where people can go to get information on what has been done and what to do to create a program. Can the EU provide resources and a site to provide this? So perhaps a moment also to talk about the new platform, for example, that we envisage for the next phase of citizen engagement at EU level, and all the work we are doing now to make citizen engagement more accessible. Floor is yours. But you are muted. Thank you.
Of course, for us, participation of citizens, we can't go back anymore. Now we are at this position, and we can only go further. We can only nurture our democracy, and we are now serious about this. And knowing that 1/3 of the world population lives in the countries undergoing autocracies, and this is according to international ideas. So I think that this is something we have to always bear in mind. And this is why European Union and European Commission wants to be at the forefront of fighting for our democracy. Of course, it's not only fighting democracy outside Europe, but also within, because there is also erosion of democracy in some member states, especially during the COVID time and now during this Ukrainian war. So we, as you know, we adopted the rule of law mechanism, which is a very good instrument imposing very strict requirements for both member states and also for candidate countries. So this is what we are doing, and we are totally aware that we need citizens to be involved in the process, as you mentioned at the very beginning, also between elections. So period of between elections is very important period, and we cannot let our citizens stay aside. And since nowadays, as you know, we are all very well informed. There is an era of digitalization, so you cannot leave citizens without information. And this constant process of dialogue, exchanging your views, is very important. Of course, some citizens are lucky to be randomly selected, some are not. But I think if those people on national, regional, local level follow our examples, this wave of deliberative democracy will be constant. And this is something which we are aiming at. So this is for us very important. Of course, we have some resources. I don't want to repeat what was already said by Art. Citizens are not paid, but in fact, they have their daily allowances, and I don't know now the details, and I don't want to talk about these details. But those who accept to participate according to randomly call, they are then very good. And we, as I said, if we based our program for this year on citizens' ideas, that means that they are really serious, and they were serious about different topics. Of course, there are topics on treaty change here in Europe, but this is not the most important one. We realized that daily issues were of most concern our citizens, and they are not that interested in institutional issues. They are more interested in their daily problems. And this is what we aimed at, and this is what we realized. So I think we only have to continue with this, and we have never to get tired on on promoting engaging citizens and our deliberative democracy.
Thank you very much. There was actually a question that I was intended to add and that we missed, which was, I think, someone impressed by the response rate for the Citizens' Assembly. I think you mentioned that it was quite high then. And the question was how you would explain it. And is it because Citizens' Assembly are now a more regular feature of your democratic life, which would be an encouragement for all of us? That Citizens' Assembly can become more inclusive because more regular, I assume.
Yeah, and that's exactly the issue, Gaëtane. You know, well, anywhere, nothing succeeds like success. You know, the first Citizens' Assembly, the first gathering had such low expectations, and when it delivered a recommendation on marriage equality and our electoral system and our parliamentary procedures, that worked so well. People stood up and paid attention. So they said, well, the next one was, well, let's give it the most intractable problem that Ireland has had over the last 60 years, which was abortion. Again, with kind of, well, nobody can fix this problem, so, but let's try this anyway. And the Citizens' Assembly on the abortion issue voted 67 to 33 in favor of a particular regime. When that question was put to a referendum of the people, the actual referendum result was 66-34, and which proves two things. You know, one is which that room of 100 people was perfectly representative of the Irish people, and secondly, and perhaps more importantly, the people were ahead of the politicians in relation to this particular issue. And it's what behavioral economists these days call the wisdom of crowds. You know, in Ireland during the pandemic, Irish people were wearing masks on public transport long before the government told them that they had to. So when the government came along 4 months later and said, you must wear masks, we said, well, listen, we've already done it. We've looked at the evidence, and to protect myself and to protect my fellow passengers, we'll do this. So there is a wisdom in getting people involved. And now in just 10 short years, our citizens' assemblies have become embedded as part of the decision-making and policy development process. I did say during my comments, and maybe the questioner missed it, that we did ask the 100 citizens who were on the Biodiversity Loss Assembly why they chose to be involved. And a third were interested in the subject, the biodiversity loss and environmentalism. A third just simply wants to make a contribution. But 1/3 of the people said that Citizens' Assembly in Ireland are the best way of getting hard problems solved. You know, and we do difficult jobs using Citizens' Assembly. We've got biodiversity loss. We did a directly elected mayor for Dublin. That's just done. We've got drug use starting next month. We're starting our recruitment. And then after that, we're going to do the future of education. And then recently, our Prime Minister announced in the Parliament that he wanted to have a Citizens' Assembly to have a look at the complex question of Ireland's neutrality, because the war in the Ukraine focused the spotlight on that particular issue. Again, a subject which the Irish people have held very dear to their hearts for 100 years now. And but now we're opening it up for a debate in a room, a representative room of 100 people.
Thank you very much. As we are reaching the end of our session, I propose to ask one last question to the Vice President and propose that to give the floor to Vice President Šuica for the end of our meeting. It's a question about the link between the European election in 2024 and whether it can be also you know, a moment where we can follow up a bit more on the Citizens' Assembly's proposal. I understood it like this. There was also a link made with the transnational list, whether this would help also to implement the requirements that came from the bottom-up level. So it's again similar question with how we can follow up and what are the links between this deliberative participatory democracy and representative democracy. And I give you the last word with this question anything else you'd like to share with us to end this meeting? Vice President, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. So, of course, European elections are important, and let's see. Citizens were in favor of transnational lists. Let's see whether this will be implemented for the next term. But of course, there are still some consultations within the parliament, within the AFCO committee, so I cannot tell you precisely what will happen. But I think something which is very important nowadays, maybe we are sometimes not aware, some of you in Australia may be too far or some others, but we have to take into account that Ukraine is at the heart of our global battle for democracy. And this is something which we have to bear in mind all the time. So this aggression poses a direct challenge to the rules-based international order, which the European Union defends. And this is something which we always have to take into consideration. And Russia and all this situation is testing the resilience of our democracies. And this is why we have to defend and be resilient. I want to mention defense, once again, defense of democracy package, which is now on the agenda of this European Commission. We are fighting democracy within, but also beyond European borders. And this is something which is very important. Of course, fake news, all this information, disinformation, this is really a big battle nowadays, and we have to be able and equipped to fight this. And this is the reason why the impact beyond the European Union is even bigger. So we need to restore our confidence, but restore confidence in particular among young people. And we need to show that democracy delivers. And this is something which we are trying to do from our level. And this is the reason why we are so innovative, and we think that we have to include citizens in all processes. So I think this will work. We have to continue to do this because it's now more important than ever. Thank you very much for including and to having me with you in this important conversation.
Thank you very much, Vice President. I think we have talked about the internal resilience of our democracies. I have to say that today, I think the internal resilience of this cohort is much stronger, thanks to all of you for joining us. We could feel your presence and your support. Angela, who is from the GRC, which some of you know have a Center for Deliberative Democracy, has put the link to the website where you can find information on the court, and both Iain and Art put their email on the chat. So anyone wanting to join, to help us in any way, as an expert, as an NGO, or to contact also governments or government representative would like to directly contact us, please do so. Let's work together and let's make sure that this very important topic of deliberative democracy and citizens' assembly have a bright future. Thank you very much to all of you. Have a good evening.
Well done, Gaëtane. Good job.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.